a motion to recess, which would mean then by parliamentary procedure, we would return to the spot at which we were. We were in the midst of Roman numeral number 5, implementation of racial bias audit recommendation. Now, Bethany is going to look and be able to capture the roll call for us without having to digress and go back to roll call. We do not expect to have anything that we need to vote on, so a quorum would be nice to have, but for this portion of the agenda, it's not a requirement since we don't have any actions, as I foresee, that we need to vote on. If you all agree, then by consensus, we can move forward. I'm just looking at you to make sure you all agree. Looks like nobody's having any problems with that. So we'll move on from this point.
I do have our roll. We have 8 people in right now, Tuan. And actually, George Palmer is about to join.
Okay.
I did want to ask, Captain Thompson, I have one person in the waiting room under Der Graham. If it's someone from the public, I can't let them in to the actual meeting.
I don't know who that is. Let me check.
Okay, thank you.
D-R-E Graham?
D-E-R Graham, G-R-A-M.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Thank you.
And while we're waiting, I did also take the liberty of asking Bethany if by chance, given the fact that there was the public safety meeting earlier today and that it was advertised that there would be the public safety meeting, and in that advertisement, it also stated that the CPAC was going to be meeting tonight. I asked her if anyone had signed up from the public to make any comments, although we'd already passed that point in our agenda. And she said no one had signed up to make any comments, to speak to us. But Bethany, there was a written comment, you said, or written question for the police department?
There was, and I can read it really quick.
Okay.
It is from, I think it's a gentleman, Wilkes Kramer. And he says, could CPD start a kind of book club, but on research where interested community members and students study assigned research on not just policing, but also on the solutions to social problems? I am reading research on how to reduce gun violence, for example, and there is a big focus on improving economic mobility. If we all focused on finding agreement of causes and solutions with the input of police on the ground, it could lead to sound policy. And that was it.
Please capture that in our minutes too, so that we can reflect back on that.
Absolutely.
See if any subcommittee can address it, or if that is something that maybe in Wendy's work, or we could share it. I don't see Jerry on yet, but Jerry Harris, but
he is joining right now.
Okay, he might be able to share it with the Special Commission on Racial Equality, since he's on that as well. Okay.
All right.
So we do have, it looks like we have more than 10. So we do end up having a quorum, which is good.
Yep.
So again, thank you all for joining. We'll pick up now, Wendy, with you. If you would start so that everybody would be back in sync. I know you were like on slide 3 or something, but I think probably it'd be better for you to start again with your in progress. That's good. Unless you want to start from the
That is exactly where it has been queued up on my screen since we left off last week. So
good deal. Thank you.
If you'd like to go there. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, just to reflect on, there was one item that we listed as completed. And if you've looked at my spreadsheet at all, it's posted online on the status of racial bias audit. My process here is I interview the commanders about these audit items. All of these audit items are assigned to commanders to oversee or implement. And my role is to help them with that, not to supplant them. And so when I do these updates, I interview the commanders and I ask them where they're at with it. If they tell me that they've completed one of these items, then I mark it as complete, but also it needs to be validated. And so it's my intention to go back and do my own analysis to make sure that we are doing it and the data reflects that. And so on that first item, I'm actually in the process of, I asked for a sample of use of force reports, and I've gone through those to validate that we are actually looking at the coding issues, and our internal audit is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I just finished up that report, or a draft of it, and I'm getting some assistance from an expert in use of force analysis at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And when that's ready, that'll go to the chief, and then at some point in the future, it may be that kind of information would be available as part of these updates. And so that's basically the process that I'm working through here. So back to this other item that's in progress. Where we left off, we just finished talking about the review period on the policies. This item, that CPD should conduct an analysis of field contacts on a periodic basis in the professional standards report. So this is, I've met with the compliance manager and the captain of internal affairs, and they're assessing their ability to do this internal audit as defined by the CNA report. And so the data points identified by CNA that are important are the reason for that field contact. The field contact reason over time is a percentage of total field contacts, the race of community member involved, and the incident roles by race. And then a consideration here is that we might layer that with some crime analysis to see, are these contacts happening where we're also seeing crimes? Are those officers talking to people in areas where we see crimes because that's where we see crimes? One of the other considerations here from the internal audit perspective is that one of the things that CNA found is that these field contacts were not being consistently performed according to policy. And so one of the things that CPD has done to improve on this is they did training with the officers and the supervisors. And then there's a compliance audit already underway where these field contacts are being approved and reviewed and approved by supervisors to make sure they're being done correctly. So that's one kind of analysis or audit.
Wendy,
and then the other kind is to audit. Yes.
where would that information be captured?
I'm sorry?
I said, where you described the training is being done, where would that information be captured or reported out?
On the training?
Yeah.
Specifically, that would be that there would be training documents to support that they've implemented that training. So if it was a formal training class, there should be some kind of material that they used in the class that the training division would have. And then if they, if you want to look at documentation, if it was a roll call type training, which I believe it was. And so what we use a system called Power DMS to do micro training, basically. And training is uploaded into that system, and then it's pushed out for employees to review. And
So how would the outcomes or the success of that be measured and reported?
It would be in the compliance audits, so that what I'm seeing in the compliance audits is that they have achieved a level of compliance in filling out these cards properly.
Okay, thank you.
So there's documentation that the training's been done, and then obviously an improvement in compliance with filling out the cards properly.
And then Wendy, following that train of thought, the compliance audits are done on what frequency?
For this?
Mm-hmm.
So those are, I believe, Captain Thompson, are those monthly? Do you know that they're looking at those?
What was the question?
The audits of the evaluation of the field contact cards by CIU. Is that a monthly report they do on that? I'm pretty
Write
sure.
it down. I'll have a follow-up answer for the group. I don't know the exact answer, but I'll have a follow-up answer for the group. No problem.
I can, as soon as this presentation's over, I don't want to back out of the presentation to go look my email, verify that, but I'll take a look at that. I believe it's a monthly report.
Okay, the only reason why I asked was because I was trying to kind of figure out what's the frequency so that you would be able to make any corrective action. You know, if it's auditing those records every 6 months, well, then corrective action wouldn't happen for another 8, maybe 7 or 8 months. But if it's monthly, then you have opportunities to make changes
Right.
in short order, you know, within 45 days or something like that.
Yes, and I believe the supervisors review the cards and make sure they're being filled out properly, and there's immediate feedback there.
Okay.
There is that's part of the puzzle, is making sure the cards, we're getting the right data, and then doing the analysis on the data points that CNN identified.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And
I had a question. I'm sorry. Can you hear me? I was curious about the data points. Just you know, I see where it says the like race of community member involved, and I was curious if like how does it take into account situations with multiple community members? Like if one person ends up getting charged, but there were 10 people there, just of different levels of culpability, or if multiple people are charged, how is that factored into the data points here?
So a field contact card is 1 card per person. So if all of you are in a single car together, which would be a bus, because all of you would, you know, be in a bus, and I'm the police officer and I pull the bus over, if I want to document everybody who was on that bus during that traffic stop, I would do a separate field contact card for each person on the bus. Would be that. And then there's a possibility that those cards can be linked together. So if I do a search and all of those cards are entered at the same date, time, and location, and then it's assumed that they're all from the same incident.
So this is Captain Cretella. Just to follow up on what Miss Wendy said, you cannot do a field contact for a group of people. They're individually assigned, and that is per our policy as well.
So 1 card, 1 person. 1 person, 1 card.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So moving on, again, these are the CNA findings on the field contacts, just to review. And, you know, in doing these analysis, we will be looking at the CNA methodology and starting with that, replicating CNA's methodology on how we analyze these things, and then, you know, working towards improving that if needed as we improve the data. And so you can see a list of the contact reasons. These are the reasons why a police officer would stop somebody and fill out one of these cards.
Wendy, what's the PPP? PPP stop search?
Captain Cretella? Somebody told me.
No, I got it. I got that, Wendy. A PPP stop is a probation, pardon, and parole stop. So we have to, we call and make sure and verify the information. We know who that person is. It gives us a reason to stop them if we didn't have another reason. But those are documented that way.
Okay, thank you. And what kinds of things are under other?
Captain Thompson? I mean, I could tell you from my past experience, but I'm not exactly sure what CPD uses other for at this point.
I'll find that answer out too.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I know one of the findings in the CNA audit is, they made recommendations that we limit the use of terms like other in a lot of our reporting data. And these are the CNA findings that you're looking at now. These aren't based on changes. This is what they analyzed. And so, but you're still going to, it's unavoidable to completely eliminate the use of a category like other in any kind of reporting. because there's always an outlier or a strange thing that we're capturing that doesn't fit into other categories.
Right, but it shouldn't be, I mean, I agree with audit. It shouldn't be your largest number either.
Correct, correct.
Yeah, that's why I'm concerned about it, because it looks like there's like that's a catch-all, and it kind of falls in line with some of the concerns that were raised during the audit, the racial audit, you know?
Right. And so
Stop because I'm driving while black or something like that. You know, my car, I have a particular car and I'm driving, and you stop me because of I'm driving that particular car, and maybe it's perceived that I ought not be driving that kind of car. So you know what I mean? So it seems like that is where those cases are, with that being the bulk of those stops.
And so that's what you're looking at, is the data that CNA analyzed that led them to make the recommendations that they've made that we're working on implementing. So that is one of them. That's one of the things that they saw, and they said, based on this data, we recommend that you make changes to this system, which
Good.
CPD has been working on.
Good.
So these are the field contacts by race. Again, this is directly from the CNA racial bias audit report. And so you see at the bottom, there's the, the different contact types, citizen complaint, loitering, narcotics, and then the breakdown by race of those field contacts. And again, incident roles by race is also included in the findings. So again, this is to give you a sense for what CNA found and what we will be doing when we, put together this analysis with the field contacts. So 19.1 is that CPD should conduct an in-depth exploration of internal complaints, including a review of complaint procedures, and you can see there. And so what we're doing is we're compiling a 5-year complaint report, so we can do some initial analysis and identify what the next steps are in meeting this audit recommendation. They have already taken measures to address this issue. And one of those is providing clear information on how citizens can make a complaint. And they've seen progress, but we still need to do an in-depth analysis on this. So this audit item is partially complete, but it's something that's we're working on right now, is periodic audits of operational practices as they relate to policy.
I'm sorry, Wendy.
Yes.
When, going back to the complaint, when do you expect to have that report available?
Of my analysis?
Yeah.
That's hard to predict. I've asked for the complaints. They just gave me the use of force complaints. And so every time I ask for a piece of data or information, somebody has to drop what they're doing and produce that data for me. And so I'm trying to not overload them with requests, so that we can continue to manage the data production for other parts of the department. So I don't have a timeline for the complaint analysis. Once I get that, I can get a sense for what I have to work with, and maybe do an analysis plan and see how it goes. So
I would perhaps, since it sounds like you'd be asking the data by type of complaint. So if you were to complete, for example, the use of force complaint data analysis, could we take a look at that, particularly since we're interested in the use of force policy changes?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so what I did was kind of a preliminary in-depth analysis to get a feel for some things, and to work with some experts on doing a more comprehensive analysis. So at some point that analysis may be available. you know, it also has to go through the chief, and I need to discuss with him. As I do these things, questions come up and I need to go back and get more information.
Sure. I'm just saying that the complaint process and use of force is a major issue. And if we as a council are to be effective and responsive to things that are of concern to the community, we need to be able to have something to say and have the data based on which to make those comments and engage folks with.
Absolutely. Yes, and we're getting as much as we can, as fast as we can.
So this is Captain Cretella, and I oversee the Office of Internal Affairs. I've spoken with you guys before, and we're eager about this partnership. So when it comes to use of force complaints, I've heard of people say that in the meeting night that there's been use of force complaints. So just for the record, we've only had one use of force complaint within the last 2 years. That this is just spinning off the top of my brain. So we don't have a bunch of use of force complaints coming in. We have use of force reports, which is anytime we use force, we must document it through our Blue Team software, but we don't have use of force complaints. I just think we need to draw attention to that, so you're not under this impression that we have numerous excessive use of force complaints, because that's just not true. And when CNA recommended, I believe it was 19.1, Wendy, can you go back to that slide real quick? Sorry.
Yeah, let me back out. 19.1.
Yeah, so when it talks about the complaint process, our policy wasn't exactly clear on what happens after you file a complaint. So unfortunately for Wendy, she wasn't with us when we were amending our policy. She wasn't even hired on yet with us. So we completed this policy change in the process of being with CNA. And the confusion is not how to file a complaint, because you could file a complaint over the phone, in email, in writing. We have people file complaints from their jail cells. So we take any complaint that comes in and we look into it. The cloudiness here was, how does it work after I file a complaint? You know, is a citizen updated on, where it is in the chain of command? Is a citizen updated after the complaint has been disposed of, whether it's been sustained or not sustained? And that's truly what CNA was looking at. So what I can do is allow you guys to review that policy so you can see the changes that were made and the clarity of it. And if for some reason it's not clear to you, then we can go back to the drawing board and relook at that complaint process again to ensure that it's crystal clear for everyone involved.
And Wendy and Captain Cretella, let me add one other thing based on what Captain Cretella opened up with. Thank you for sharing that, Captain. One thing I do want to remind everyone of, I know we on the council are sensitive to it. We recognize that the whole reason why this council, or one of the main reasons, I should say, this council was established was because of the concern of a trust issue between the community and the police department, and trying to improve the relationship between the community and the police department. I understand that you may only have, Captain Cretella, one complaint, or you don't have many complaints, but we as citizens hear something else. We hear complaints, but not that formal complaints have been submitted. And so even if there are no formal complaints, but there are complaints in the community, then you can still have a relationship issue. So we're really trying to work to ensure that we can work on those relationships. So I do appreciate the fact that you, Captain Cretella, are working on making that procedure, you and your team are working to make that procedure as clear, crystal clear to the community as possible. And I hope you can appreciate too, that there is still a concern about the use of force.
You are exactly right. And that's why we're having this conversation today.
Right.
I just didn't want people to think we have this crazy amount of excessive use of force complaints when that's not true. And we want to encourage community members to come forward and talk with us. You know, we take every complaint seriously. And like we said, we take them in different manners as well. And we want to bridge that gap. So if something is going on, that we do know about it.
Right, and that probably will The bridging that gap will probably happen through communications. We have to find other ways to communicate the opportunities that are there and welcomed at the police department. Whereas in the past and even right now, there are folks who don't believe that a complaint would be taken seriously. So why take the time to complain? You know, to lodge a formal complaint. Not to belabor the issue, but when you made that statement, I just thought we needed to be reminded and bring that point to the front, because I think, Wendy, you're spot on here with what needs to be done.
But Wendy,
I'm sorry.
is my audio?
Yeah, your audio's on. We can hear you. Both of you were talking at the same time.
Go ahead, I'll wait.
That is muted.
I was just going to ask, sort of on the same theme of the public trust issue, with regard to body worn cameras. Is there any? I was looking through the report and see where they made different recommendations about that policy, but I was curious if there's been any effort to just specifically with use of force incidents, go back and look at those, any images caught by body worn cameras there, and document whether the cameras worked, whether everything was caught, or if the equipment was malfunctioning. Is that at all factored into the data that y'all are keeping?
Yes. So what we started is we had a body camera policy, and we had our audit with CNA. They pointed out some improvements, and we made those necessary improvements. And just to let everyone know that anytime there's a use of force that's been documented in Blue Team, it goes through a layer of supervisor reviews. So all those use of forces on body camera have been reviewed. In addition to that, supervisors above the rank of sergeant and above have to do 2 random reviews every month, and it gets documented. And they're just not that's in addition to the use of force. So if officers go on an alarm call, they're looking at that. If it's categorized as a certain report, they're looking at that just to make sure that we're doing what we say we're doing. We're treating all citizens with respect. And there's even one called an accidental activation, which if you hit your body camera, you want to make sure that there's no one's hiding anything within that category. So we review that. Our compliance manager, Mr. Galuli, started that months ago, and we have had no issues that have been documented that have led to a formal complaint. There has been some small issues such as passion, but we do review those to ensure that nothing else is going on that we aren't aware of, because like you said, we need to be aware of everything going on.
Wendy, while you're doing all of this, is my audio on? While we're doing all of this, if you look at that other category, which puts CPD in a wide open position, since it's the largest category, I sit here and think of at least a dozen things that fall into that category that would be related to motor vehicle violations. And it doesn't matter who's driving the car and what circumstances. If you don't completely define that other category, you're really wide open to criticism. That's already happened tonight.
Any other questions?
Yes. Wendy, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This seems like an awful lot of data, and the more data we have, the better you can run a police department. In the data, I'm sure that you list geographically where stops or where crime is in the city. You know, have it by precinct or by team. Is the data also show whether the stops are for residents or somebody from out of town? We are a tourist town. There may be people who come in and imbibe too much and get into an altercation or trouble with the police. Do we list whether they're a resident, based on their address or not? Do we keep that data?
So in a reporting system, when a person is stopped or cited or issued a warning, typically you would collect that person's home address.
Do we isolate that data so that we know whether we're dealing with citizens or visitors or people, people who are not citizens.
In theory, one of the challenges in policing is that a lot of the data from people is self-reported. And so I haven't gotten this deep into the data here in Charleston, but I can tell you that I am very familiar with some career criminals in my last job, and they never once gave me their real home address. They always gave me their mom's home address. So when I went looking for them, they were obviously never at mom's house. So sometimes that's challenging. You have folks who are transient. So if you give us your address today, but you move 6 months from now, we may not have accurate data. We can assume that it's accurate as of today when we stopped you. So for a point in time, but at the same time, sometimes it doesn't account for people who might be untruthful or who are transient, and that kind of thing. So it's challenging. No data is ever going to be perfect, but in theory, yes, we should be able to identify how many residents we encounter and how many non-residents we encounter.
Just to have an idea of what our crime or stop problem is or whatever, do we have a lot of problems with visitors coming in or not,
Yes, sir. No, I see what you're getting at. That is something that we could look at. That's more of a criminal analysis. And so a lot of my time is focused on the audit or the internal analysis type stuff, but we do have crime analysts who could look into that.
Okay, thank you.
And guys, I'm going to put on the agenda for the next time. Sometimes it's kind of hard to gauge some of the questions you're going to have. We try to make sure we have the right people on the call. But we'll have somebody from our crime analyst group at the next meeting, so we can address some of these questions.
Thank you.
So, and as we work through these audit recommendations and we implement these strategies to conduct the analysis and the internal audits, we're working with the crime analysts to figure out what we can and cannot capture. So again, back to this is partially complete, that CPD should conduct periodic audits of operational practices as they relate to policy. The reason we say this is partially complete is because we are conducting audits of our body-worn cameras. Supervisors, as you heard Captain Cretella say, are expected to review them. Anytime there's a use of force report, they're reviewing the video, and then they're doing random video reviews, which is very common in police departments. Not just to verify that we're in compliance with our policies, but they're looking at the officer's actions, and if there's a training issue they identify in that video, then they should be making a referral to the training bureau to address that. So the use of force coding audit is ongoing with our compliance manager. And, the audit recommended ride-alongs to observe operations and develop this audit plan. With COVID, that's been challenging. It's on my list of things to do, to get out and get in a cruiser and watch how things are done to help develop some ideas about how we can marry those operational policy audits to, or operational practice audits to policy. And so this will develop as we go. I can't implement every single audit recommendation tomorrow. So we're putting together some strategies and plans to work on some of these things. The analysis is challenging. And so, we're leveraging partnerships with researchers who have expertise on these levels of analysis to make sure we're doing it appropriately. And so it's a marathon and not a sprint. We're making progress, and these are what I shared with you tonight were the audit priorities that I'm trying to work on right now. And so are there any more questions on the audit update?
Thank you very much, Wendy, for sharing. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I think you can tell that from all of our questions, right? That we are paying attention. So much for put that much effort into providing this very comprehensive information to us.
Absolutely. And these are great questions. You guys are helping me out a lot too, because, sometimes it's hard to anticipate what is more important or less important to the community. And so this is really good feedback to help guide this work.
Oh, good, great. Okay, next on our agenda are some subcommittee reports. For those who are listening in, who are not members of the council, we have, in accordance with some of the recommendations from the racial bias audit, developed or established some subcommittees to work on a few issues. Those 3 subcommittees to date are traffic stops, led by Joe Lessett, who's not on tonight's call, and then communications, led by Paul Tamburino, and then policies and procedures, led by Max Milligan. I know Joe did send us you sent us the minutes from the traffic stops, but did he send a synopsis to be reported tonight?
He did not send one to me. Let me double check real quick.
Okay, and while you're doing that, Paul, if you're ready, we can go ahead and have you give the synopsis from the efforts of the communication subcommittee.
Sure.
Thank you.
Basically, our subcommittee has the following council members as participants of it. Tuan, me, Jerry, Hack, and of course, Wendy, Bethany, and Steve are also members. We met on September 3rd, and basically it was an organizational meeting where we wanted to just get together for the first time, talk about some of our goals, on what we wanted to accomplish. I've submitted a report, the minutes of the report that outlines most of that. But I think basically some of the things we touched upon is how can we better communicate the existence of the CPAC and the continued communication of initiatives. I think the overall perspective is we know we exist, and internal people know we exist, but how many people on the outside have any idea that we exist? And so what we need to do is we need to go through the channels of social media, reaching out through the various, and I would honestly say leveraging our high school students was a big plus, because, folks as old as me, they'll typically go on to these civic websites and pay attention to this, but the younger folks that we should be reaching out to don't. And so how do we best communicate with them, both in person, through the schools, through social media? How do we accomplish that so that, we get more participation, and that, to be very blunt, that this committee is not just a checkbox to say, hey guys, it exists, we've satisfied an audit, good to go. There's no value in that. If we're just an echo chamber for each other, there's no purpose for it. So we brainstormed some ideas. I did task the committee members to come back. Taking Wendy's, we went over the communication pieces that related to, that were from the audit, and Wendy went over those with us. And I think there was 5 major points. We talked about those, and then I did task the committee members to come back before our next meeting and provide 1 or 2 recommendations for each point, so that, when we meet again, we're not just setting meetings to set meetings, we're actually coming back with executable ideas to bring back to the overall group. So I'm hoping that we can have some stuff to bring back, because again, we're not communicating on behalf of the subcommittee, we're communicating on behalf of the entire CPAC.
Thanks, Paul. Any
me?
questions? Any questions for Paul dealing with the communication subcommittee? Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Policies and procedures, Max?
Yes, ma'am. Hey, everyone. My name is Max Milliken. Members who were present at our September 9th Policy and Procedures Subcommittee meeting were myself, Mr. Jerome Harris, Mrs. Doris Scranton, Mr. Matt Austin, Mrs. Emily Broom, and I'm not sure if anyone else was present. The record that Mrs. Whitaker took should reflect if I missed anyone, but I think I covered it. We also had Mrs. Stiver present along with Mr. Rumelin. Actions we completed at our September 9th meeting. Basically, we started with a discussion on what kind of the scope would be as far as what we could do as a subcommittee in reference to the whole CPAC and then the police department itself. So we discussed, we made some requests of Mrs. Stiver. We requested a presentation on the best practices for citizen involvement and similar citizens police advisory councils. And we also requested an update on the sanctity of life statement that's currently in progress for the November meeting. And then we also discussed presentations on best practices for citizen involvement and the formulation of policy. So that will take place in November tentatively. And Mrs. Stiver, I emailed you, I know I emailed you after that meeting, kind of following up, discussing those requests, but then also just clarifying the role in the Citizens Police Advisory Council as a subcommittee. We agreed to meet every 2 months. We didn't set our next meeting date. And then so actions pending would be those possible presentations on the complaint process for the November meeting. And then, as I stated, the next subcommittee meeting date's not known.
Thank you, Max. Any questions regarding policies and procedures subcommittee? And each one of them did send, Bethany has sent us, and thank you, Bethany, for sending us the minutes from each of those subcommittees meetings. Council members, if you would please review those. And if you have any questions about them, please try to get your questions back to subcommittee leader for each of those subcommittees so that those can be addressed in the subcommittee. And then at the next subcommittee's meeting, you would need to review your minutes, approve your minutes. And then Bethany, once you would approve those minutes, then Bethany can post those as subcommittee meeting minutes to the website as well.
Yep.
Okay.
And Juan, Joe did not send me an overview. I just have the minutes that I typed up.
That you sent. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we're ready. Any questions about anything we've done so far? Good deal. Okay, we'll go to the updates, community engagement, Captain Thompson. And then after Captain Thompson, I know you had last week, Captain Cortello was going to present as officer training and diversity. And then Wendy was going to come back and do the 360 comp status. And then Chief would give us updates. I'm sure Chief is probably going to include some of his public safety meeting he attended on today as well.
Yes, we'll be sure to leave enough time for the chief at the end there.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. I know you've been trying to get an update from me for the last couple of months. Apologize not being at the last meeting. You guys that were on the committee last year heard me say this, but I'll just repeat it again. You know, a big part of community outreach is communication. When I took over this division 18 months ago, all the community meetings we went to, every interaction that I had with the community is they want more communication. They want to see more police. So I took that to heart. What we do is we, in our training now with our command staff, our first line supervisors and down to the troops, we emphasize that building community partnerships is just as important as traditional police work. So they have to understand that there's a healthy balance of both, right? So as they go about their day-to-day jobs, that's their mentality. They should have a healthy balance of building community partnerships along with traditional police work. A big part of building community partnerships is problem solving. So we try to incorporate a lot of this into our community outreach. So I took a step back and you know, we all know that the community meetings we go to that are very formal, that we take turns raising our hand, asking questions. A lot of times people might be, we don't get that interaction. We don't get that face-to-face interaction. So over the last year, my team in the community outreach division has worked on informal meetings, informal community engagement so that you have that face-to-face interaction. You're able to exchange cell phone numbers. They know who Captain Thompson is. They know who Captain Cretella is. They know who Officer A, B, and C are. We've done a lot in the police department to include going to permanent shifts so that officers, that the community members know who their officers are. They don't switch shifts. You're going to see the same 5 or 6 officers every time you call the police, depending on what time of the day you call the police. We've done that. We've even reached out to make sure that all the first line supervisors have city cell phones. We all communicate through cell phone, through text now. So being able to give out that cell phone number for instant communication is very vital. We want to make sure that, you know, as we continue to grow with that program with the cell phones, that we get them out to all the officers as well. So ongoing, but our first step was to get the first line supervisors and then all the detectives in the department with that city cell phone, so they're not afraid to give out that number for instant communication. With COVID, we were slowed down a little bit, and we had to regroup, but I would say that a lot of positive things, great ideas have come out because we're limited and we have to do a lot of online things. And I'll just run down some of the things that we've done over the last year. One of the big things is that we partner with the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy. I had this on the list to talk about the last meeting, and a couple of the council members have reached out since then asking about it. But we partner with the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy to keep us moving in the right direction. We partner with them so that we have an outside entity looking at what we're doing for community outreach with the police department. We're meeting. We set it up to meet quarterly, but now it seems like about every other week we're meeting with Rich Robinson and some of the chaplains. They're coming out to all of our events and being a part of it. But we really want that outside group, and as well as this group, to take a look at what we're doing to make sure we're going in the right direction. And if something's not working, then we're going to adjust and move forward. Or if they're bringing great ideas to the table. So we are working with them. There is a format that they like to follow. It's called the Partnership Project, if you hear about it in the media. But it's basically broken down very simply: presence, partnership, and progress. Those 3 things is what we're focusing on. And I know, like I said, if anybody else in the group is interested in getting involved with that, please reach out to me. I know Paul's reached out. I know Wendy called me earlier today or yesterday and asked me about it. So the more help we have with that, the more community members we can encourage to get involved with that program, the better. It's really just boots on the ground, having that, again, that informal face-to-face interaction and problem solving is what we're focusing on with that. Citizens Academy, we had to shut both of those down this year, but we're excited. In the spring of next year, we're working on an online academy. We reached out to Orlando. We reached out to a lot of different police departments, but Orlando PD has a really good online Citizens Academy. So we're looking at their curriculum and building our own. So you should see that start being advertised in the spring of next year. So we're really excited about that. We're still in the early stages of that. If anybody wants to get involved, please, I welcome the help. You know, we do have a whole team on it, but again, that's just something that we're really excited about. One of the things that's come out with COVID that you've probably seen on the news is the birthday parades. That's something that the community loves. It's something that we didn't do much of before COVID, but because of COVID, we started doing those. We've done 70 this year, and we get calls at the last minute for a birthday party or whatever it is, a graduation, and that's been very positive. That's been very good for the department. And we have not only the community outreach team participates, but other commanders, other officers, and other patrol teams. What we've been asking for the whole department to get involved with community outreach is that this is one area that officers are really engaging in, and they love to do it. And we're not getting any pushback with it, which is great. You might have seen us. The team has come up. We bought some tents, and we just pop up at a grocery store parking lot. Again, ask a cop anything, informal, no set directive, just there to engage with the community, to get to know them and problem solve. We've done a lot of food distributions. I won't run through all of them for the sake of time, but that's something that's come out during COVID that we do have the pharmacy every week at Mall Park. We started that back up. That was shut down for a while for COVID, but we've got a good plan in place for that to stay safe. Our command post, you might have seen on the news, the command post is an RV or a big bus that is our mobile command post that we can park anywhere and run an incident out of. It's actually the chief's idea last year to start using that, taking it out in the different communities. And it's been very positive. We did it on the east side. We've done it in West Ashley. We've done it in Johns Island, where we take the command post out, set it up. We're there all day with a community outreach team, and we have the actual patrol officers come and do their roll calls, their morning roll call, where you come in and you check in to make sure you have all your equipment and, you know, go over whatever's happened the shift before. But all 3 shifts will have the roll call there in the parking lot, wherever we are out in the community. Again, we're encouraging people to come up, talk to us. That informal contact has been very positive, and we're continuing to schedule those and have those out there. One thing that we talked about last year during Citizens Advisory Council was the bike patrol. And we got a little sideways with that with COVID, but we've talked to the chief, we've talked to our budget analyst, and we're really getting back on track with that. Buying bicycles. We did find 15 bicycles late last year, got those repaired. Those went out to the community outreach team, to our housing authority officers, and a couple to patrol. But we really want to build our bicycles back in the community next year. So we're back on track with that. Like I said, I got a little sidetracked, but that was something we were excited about in this council last year, and we'll be moving forward with that. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. I was writing notes because we mentioned last week that we were going to start to do some type of status report to be able to share with the mayor and city council so that our representatives will know exactly what's going on with this council. And I'll be getting with Chief sometime within the next couple of weeks so that we could draft something as a joint effort and then send it out to the members of CPAC to review before we actually submit it to the City Council of Charleston. So thank you very much, Captain Thompson, for all that you all are doing and that wonderful report. That's a lot of progress, a lot of actions that you have going on for outreach in the community. Jerry, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Captain Thompson, you mentioned that the Academy is looking for online opportunities. I was wondering whether or not, since we're required as council members to take Policing 101, can we fast track that in some way so the council members can get up to speed on that?
Yes, sir. I'll make a note of that. I know you asked me that early on, and I'll make a note of that. I think that we can probably condense something once we get a good platform and get right now we're just trying to make sure we got the right instructors in the right place, but I don't want to rush a condensed 101, maybe a split it up over 2 days, maybe a 4-hour block. Because in the past, anybody that's gone through the Policing 101 has been a fast track 5-hour on a Saturday. But I really want the group to experience, when we created Policing 101 several years ago, we wanted to get the citizen in the mindset of the police officer and kind of walk them, not quickly, but briefly through kind of the training that an officer goes through, and then obviously put you through the scenarios and all that kind of stuff. So absolutely, I'll add that to the list, and I think that we could probably accomplish that maybe by the first of the year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions, council members? Okay. And is it Captain Cortella, you're going to do the officer training and diversity?
Yes, I am, ma'am.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.
All right, so I know we have a little bit of time, which is good because this is a little bit lengthy, but it's extremely important to us. And just let everyone know the topics that we're about to discuss is department-wide training. So everyone gets in the department, whether you just got hired on and are in a police corps program, or you are the chief of police, you still have to go through this training, whether it's annually or every 2 years, but these are some requirements. So we started the ethics training back in 2010. And since then, every officer in the department had to go through a basic ethics course. And you think about ethics, you're thinking about, are things right or wrong, but it's more than that. We give scenario-based training where we've taken scenarios throughout the US, kind of put officers in there that have made national headlines, not from here locally, and ask them simply, what would you do? You know, do you have the courage to turn in another officer? Do you know how to turn in another officer? What is the right protocol to do that? If you see an example of excessive use of force, what are you going to do? Are you going to hide behind the badge, or are you going to do the right thing? And we put them really through that training so they truly understand that, you know, we do have the public's trust, and it's more than just what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. We've had good, I would say, improvement with that program because it's pretty robust. And we do get good feedback. And a lot of our younger officers, it really makes them think that, you know, when you're in this profession, it's more than just having a gun and a badge. It's, you know, the possibility of taking somebody's constitutional rights away. And that comes down to ethics. Are you doing the right thing even when nobody is looking? And, you know, if you have any input from this committee on how we can improve ethics, or if you want to help us even make this program evolve, we are all ears open to that. And we are welcoming anything, because we're always looking to improve on that program, because we want to make that the best that there is, because that is the true core value of who we are as the Charleston police officers. The next one is fair and impartial policing. This training started in around 2012, 2013. And once again, it's department-wide. And this focuses on implicit biases. And it's fair to say, because study has shown that everyone has an implicit bias. And it just doesn't matter if it's race, it could be gender identity, it could be someone's job, it could be how they look. And we talk about implicit biases. Can you override a bias that you have? And how can you override that particular bias? And, you know, it's more than just teaching the class. It's also important for our commanders to understand this, because when they're reviewing body-worn camera, when they're reviewing citations, arrest reports, or FCC data, you know, if they might see a bias towards an officer, that's our chance to address it. And that's why we really focus in on our commanders is, you know, this is just not training that you need to be aware of, but you need to take this into when you're reviewing all this data, because if you do see a bias, then we do need to address it. We are hoping to have you guys participate in a class for implicit bias and fair and impartial policing. This could be done via online. It's not required to be hands-on per se. So when we can get a date and time set, we'll definitely present you with fair and impartial policing training. The next one is our civil rights in Charleston. We started this back in 2015. Unfortunately, we haven't had any new classes since 2019, or since, I'm sorry, 2020 of this year because of COVID-19. But that's because the outside instructors come in. And pretty much this class, it's a historical segment on the impact of the civil rights movement within the Charleston community, as well as the police department. You know, this course was designed outside of the Charleston Police Department, so it's not being taught internally. It's being taught by professors at the College of Charleston and someone from the library that talks about understanding the impact of policing from where this area has come from into modern day police practices. And it's truly that transformation. And once again, since COVID, you know, once our restrictions have been eased, we will reintroduce this to the department. And once again, this is taught from outside professionals, if you will. So that's why we had to put a pause on it in March of this year. The next one we focus on is community-oriented policing. Captain Thompson and his group does come in. Not only do they do a presentation on it, but requires so many hours for the officers to get out there and actually go to these events. And what we've learned over time is that we've seen a shift in mentality of, oh, that's not my job, that's someone else's, to truly incorporating community-oriented policing into everything we do. And I believe we are making progress on that. Another one that is pretty new that started in 2019 is gender identity. And what we're looking on this class, which is done internally, is to break down those barriers, common misnomers, and I'd say identifying appropriate interaction techniques between different members of the community, and particularly the LGBTQ IAP community as well. You know, we've seen some national things to where simply as a police report, and if it's written incorrectly, that you could have a form a bad relationship with different segments in the community, and that's something that we don't want to do. So this class breaks down the basics of, when do you address someone? Using the proper pronouns. Maybe that's not the time to address the proper pronouns, or just ask them, how do you want to be referred to as? Because once you establish that relationship there, you form that trust that I would say it's fair to say that the LGBTQ community historically probably hasn't trusted the police because of things that were done years ago, but we're trying to truly bridge that gap. And once again, that goes out to all of our department. We are proud to say that we started our EPIC, which is our Ethical Policing is Courageous program this year. It was based out of New Orleans Police Department. And that class is taught to help, basically a duty to intervene. If you see something going sideways or south on a call, do you have the courage to stand up and pull that officer away or to intervene and take control of that situation? Also talks about, do you have the courage to, if you saw something, report either to the Office of Internal Affairs or that person's supervisor, hey, something's going on. We need to intervene with Officer Smith because of these reasons. We are partnering up with a private partnership. It's in this new program called ABLE, and it's going to be held externally from the police department, but it's a spinoff of EPIC. So while we continue to teach EPIC, this would be like EPIC 2.0, and we are going to bring that to the police department. We are in the application process of receiving the training materials and getting approved for it. So hopefully that'll be done within the next 2 months, and we can incorporate that into our training coming up in 2021. The next one is multiculturalism for law enforcement. And what we're looking at here is, since we all don't come from the same cloth, is for all the officers to appreciate different cultural diversity, recognizing changing ethnicity among communities, and related changes to institutional policy, and what does our policy speak on that? And we are putting our officers through that. Once again, that's done externally through the FBI and our partnerships with them. It's so slow going with COVID, but we are making headway. That is one class that didn't stop. We just had to cut down on the class size. So instead of doing 30 or 40, it's down to 10 to 15. But our goal is to get the officers through that through 2021. And the one is de-escalation training, or ICAT, and that stands for Integrating Communications, Assessment, and Tactics. And that's pretty much your decision-making model. And once again, it's bringing a situation down through talking rather than using force, going hands-on, or going intermediate weapons. And we have seen great success with that. When you look at our numbers for use of force, you would think with the hundreds of thousands of interactions we have every year that our numbers would be, a lot. We really don't have that here. And we do pride ourselves on that because of the culture we have with the de-escalation and talking to people. When you exit the police car, that's your first sign of officer presence is a use of force, and then it's how you talk to someone. And it's recognizing that they're a father, they're a mother, they're a brother, they're a sister, they're a family member, or a spouse. And I think we have achieved that compared to some national trends that we've seen with excessive use of force complaints. And it's just taking the time to talk to people. And once again, these classes, we can roll them out to you. If you have an interest in them, let us know. We can set something up. So a lot of the stuff we can do via online, and we'd like your input on that. Or do you like what we have? Do you have other suggestions on what we could be doing or should be doing? And we are completely open to that.
Thank you, Captain Cortella. I have a couple of questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that the civil rights training had been tabled because of COVID. Are you considering doing training online, doing Zoom classes or MS Teams, utilizing Cisco WebEx or anything for that training?
So for that class, we've talked about it. There's some mandatory training that we've done through the department online. That class, in my opinion, and what we've taught or thought about is the one-on-one interpersonal reaction or interpersonal presentation is going to be a lot more powerful than sitting behind a computer screen and watching that. And while we know it's a step back, we think it's a right move because it's such an important presentation that, once again, these just aren't check marks to say that 390 officers went through this, class, give us a round of applause. We truly want them to digest the material and to actually see what's being presented, because as we know, there's a huge cultural shift, especially from the African-American community, in trusting the police officers. And there's some of those issues out there. We want to bridge that gap. And once again, it's due to the outside presenters. And once we get the go ahead to continue that, we definitely will, but we feel that it's better received in person than via Zoom, Teams, or WebEx.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question, I do want to tell you, I think the training plan, those courses that you listed out, I did write most of them down, sound very impressive and should get to where diversity would be the end result for the police officer. My final question, though, is, are these courses handled in-house, or do you use an outside concern to provide the training? Other than civil rights, I know you told me about that one, but how about the other courses?
Correct. So when it comes to ethics, that course is built in-house, and that's built by essentially our command staff presenting it internally. The fair and impartial policing, that's an outside course. And I believe Dr. Lori Friedel and Miss Anna Laszlo, they composed that course, and we are using their materials and presenting it to the Charleston Police Department. The community-oriented policing, that's done by Captain Thompson, that's internally. Gender identity, I believe that was done internally by members of the police department that identify with the LGBTQ community and other minority groups of that. The ethical policing is courageous or EPIC. That was done externally, meaning that the New Orleans Police Department created the foundation for it. The only thing we changed is logos and some internal policies within there to make sure that applies by our guidelines. The multiculturalism for law enforcement, that is done by the FBI, which is external, and they present their course. And the de-escalation ICAT training, that is also done from the outside as well, but we handle that internally by presenting that through the training that we have had.
Thank you.
And once again, if you guys have any suggestions on how we can improve ethics, please let us know your feedback. We're willing to improve that program or change it. Or if you guys want to hear any courses, even on a one-on-one, we could walk you through it. We'd be more than happy to do that for you guys.
Well, and
Sounds
I'll
good.
just add that we do a lot of train the trainer, just on the amount of officers that we have. Some of the
Okay.
good training that he talks about, we'll do train the trainer with our training staff, and then we'll replicate that training moving forward. But it is based on national best practices.
Okay.
Captain, I've got a question. I guess it's a question and a comment at the same time. You know, I hear a lot on these discussions about training getting pushed back because of COVID and this getting pushed back because of COVID. You know, you've got a workforce that is working, so it's not like they're not able to go to work and potentially be trained. But, you know, a lot of this backlog that by the time you say, okay, we're going to open the door for training, you up, then it's going to take so much longer to do that. And, you know, I would say that, you know, I'm not trying to be critical, but I would question that strategy of the easy go-to of saying, let's push it back because of COVID. COVID's become a very easy way to push a lot of needed things back. And I hope
No, we are
doing
not.
that.
So the only class that's been pushed back has been the civil rights. All of our training has been continued because of COVID. Every year, officers have to go through a 40-hour course of training. That includes defensive tactics, legals, firearms, CPR, active shooter, some form of ethics, whether it's EPIC, de-escalation. So we didn't stop that training. All that training has been pushed forward. The only thing that looked different was that the range, instead of having indoor classroom for the legal portion, that was brought outdoors. Or instead of shooting next to every other lane, it was every 3 lanes. But we maintained that standard and we never missed a beat whatsoever. The first 2 months, we put a pause because we were trying to figure out a good training plan. Because when we train with the department, we bring people in from downtown to West Ashley to inside the building. And what we didn't want to do was cross-contaminate and take out 30 people at one time and basically be a super spreader. So we had to do it methodically, but everyone is up to date on their training. And we're actually going to finish block training this year almost a month ahead of time prior, because we truly stayed on that training plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments related to officer training and diversity? Thank you, Captain Cretella. Wendy, we're back to you with the 360 status, 360 comp status. Oh, there you
Yes, and if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen again.
go. That's good.
I don't have a whole PowerPoint for this. I apologize, but even better, what I have is the CompStat 360 data site. So while I pull that up, it's important to talk about real briefly the historical context here. CompStat, if you've not heard of it, was created in New York City in the early 90s by Bill Bratton, who was the commissioner at the time. And they just started by looking at data, and it seems strange that this was not already being done, but they started by looking at data related to crime and how they could actually use that data to measure crime and respond to it more efficiently or more effectively. And so that spread around the country, and a lot of departments started using the CompStat model. An interesting part of that is that most police departments don't like to use the word CompStat to describe their process, and a lot of police departments changed the name of it, but they basically apply this model. After a period of time, the Department of Justice was interested, and organizations like the National Police Foundation and the Police Executive Forum were interested in learning about how we could improve on CompStat. What's the next evolution of it? And for a period of time, they called it CompStat 2.0, and eventually it evolved into CompStat 360, and which brings us to the year 2020. The National Police Foundation and the Vera Institute of Justice were funded by both the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the Arnold Foundation to implement CompStat 360 across the United States. And I've been working on this project with both the National Police Foundation and the Vera Institute, which has been a very interesting opportunity to see how other people are attempting to implement this model.
Do they don't want to go? One
of the important things to note here is that no police department in the nation has fully implemented CompStat 360. It's a little bit more complex, and the ideas are based on CompStat, but this idea of making it truly 360 is challenging. The city of Baltimore is probably closer to having it fully implemented than a lot of other agencies. Some of the agencies that the Police Foundation partners with have applied this model to specific problems like mental health or certain crime issues. Recruiting or officer wellness in very focused ways. So what we do in Charleston is attempting to implement this model in a meeting that we call Stat 360, because we had to change the name. We weren't required to, but police departments for some reason like to change the name of CompStat to something else. The Police Foundation is actually, after learning that we call it Stat 360, I think they're going to rename the model Stat 360 as well. So what you see in front of you is the basic information about the model. The idea is that there's three basic components to managing a police department in terms of using data. One is preventing, interrupting, and solving crime. And this is on a publicly available website. Any of you can go to the CompStat360.org website and learn more about this model. So under preventing, interrupting, and solving crime, implementing and assessing promising and evidence-based practices is in addition to that idea. Maximizing organizational effectiveness. The goals are officer satisfaction, safety, and well-being, optimizing the way we assign our officers, providing resources necessary for success, and implementing a 360-degree learning and evaluation program. The big one here, and the reason why we're talking about this at CPAC, is how do we integrate community and governmental partners? And so the idea is that we have shared responsibility of outcomes across stakeholders. Policing practices are equitable and accessible to all, and we're enhancing trust between community members and the police, understanding factors that are impacting the community and their ability to respond. That's the goal. So what we've done so far is the Charleston Police Department has created a strategic plan for the next 5 years. Every commander, every captain, and the civilian directors they have assigned objectives in that strategic plan, and that strategic plan includes metrics that should help them identify whether or not they're meeting those objectives. And so what we've been working on is working with the captains through a monthly meeting to help them identify what objectives they can work on and how to find the metrics to tell them whether or not they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. For example, under Captain Thompson's command, I'm going to pick on him, is recruiting. And one of his objectives under recruiting is to increase minority hiring, right? So this is data that is not always necessarily captured in a policing organization in a useful or meaningful way. And so as we're basically building the airplane while we're flying it, to quote Jerry. But what we need to do is then help the captains understand what questions should they be asking and what data should they be looking for. If you work in government, you understand that you have been conditioned in a lot of ways to accept that there are limitations to the information you can get, and sometimes you're taught to work around them. But we're not normally taught in government to change the systems to produce the information that we need. And so that is a serious paradigm shift for this organization, for police officers to say, well, I need this data to do my job. Therefore, I have an expectation that the system's going to change to give it to me. We're accustomed to dealing with the limitations of what we have. So under Captain Thompson's shop with the recruiting objective to hire more minority officers, we started out by asking, well, how many do we have now? That's the first step. The second step is, how many did we hire this year? How many minority officers applied this year? What's the delta or the difference between the number of officers that applied and the number of officers that were hired? And then once we have that information, why did we not hire those minority officers who applied? They came to us, they were interested in a job. We didn't hire them. Where did we lose them at? And so then we have to go back and continue breaking down that data and information to give Captain Thompson the picture that he needs to make adjustments in his strategies to meet his objectives. And then once we get Captain Thompson to the point where he's got the internal data, and he's comfortable with asking that question and getting that internal data to work with, then how do we integrate the community and governmental partners in that objective? And that's when we're going to come back to CPAC and say, okay, we're ready for you to be integrated in this process. And what information do you have available through your community outreach to help improve minority hiring for the Charleston Police Department? And some of those questions may be, what's the applicant pool? Once we get further along in this process, when we hire minority officers, where are we hiring them from? Are they local or are they out of state? Where are we more or less successful in making those hires? And if we're more successful in hiring minority applicants from the city of Charleston, what can we do to improve on and maximize our efforts to do that? Or have we tapped out the recruiting pool in Charleston? Do we need to go further out of state? And so the process really is about asking the questions, identifying what data is necessary to answer those questions, and then continuing to build on it until we have a 360-degree model to do that. So we've laid the groundwork. We've worked with the captains. We've kind of got them in this process. It's been very painful for them, I can assure you, because they're having to do something that they've never done before. And then we're going to bring in the National Police Foundation after this on they provide free training and technical assistance. And so we have the opportunity to work with analysts who have been working on this model for a while with other cities, who can sit down with our analysts and our captains and look at how we're collecting and reporting out that data. I recognize that this is probably one of the driest things we've ever talked about at CPAC. Data, as much as we try to make data interesting and exciting, it typically is not. And so, this is, you know, this is a process that's going to take time to implement. And we're doing it in the midst of a lot of these captains have a lot of other things on their plates. So in addition, you know, they'll be in the middle of dealing with a flooding issue or hurricane preparations, and I'll be pestering Captain Thompson for his recruiting data, right? So to pick on him some more. And so I have to be patient, and we've got to work through this in a way that's meaningful, but, you know, also recognizing that there's a lot of other things going on in the department and the community. And so we're getting there. I'm very hopeful.
Great. Any questions? Thank you, Wendy. Any questions?
Super quick, if anybody's interested and they want to look at, if you go to the CompStat 360 website, there are actually webinars on here that you can, anybody can go and watch these webinars. If any of you have time or interest in watching them and you pick up anything that you see, that you shoot me an email. I'd love to talk about it and capitalize on anything you find that interests you.
Thank you. I was just jotting that down. Thanks. Any questions, council members? Okay, Chief?
Greetings. I hope everybody's doing great. I'm going to try to kind of go through a bunch of things quickly and maybe answer some questions at the end. I'll just kind of hit on a handful of things. One, just today at 2 o'clock, we had a public safety briefing. As was discussed earlier, it actually lasted about 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's on YouTube. It's recorded. The topic was the after action report for May 30th and May 31st and beyond. There's also today at 1 o'clock, a preliminary report was put online. You can get the link. It's, I think, about 62 pages long. We put a lot of thought into it. There's a lot of lessons learned, and perhaps we can put it on the agenda for the next meeting. I think in the interest of brevity, it'd probably be good to point everybody to that so that you can actually get on the link, see the report, and be prepared, you know, with questions, and maybe we can have some dialogue for next month's agenda.
Actually, Chief, Captain Thompson sent it to all of us.
Excellent. Yeah, I knew that he was
emailed it
doing
to all
that
of us. So thank you so much for that. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Very, very important that we learn from that we're transparent about it, that we make necessary adjustments and changes as we continue along. And the next topic I was just going to hit on is protests. Since we started permitting again from COVID, we had stopped permitting for a period of time. And in the beginning of July till current, we've permitted over 60 events, and just a lot of challenges associated with that, a lot of rumors, a lot of things on social media that really have concerned a lot of citizens. And so I just kind of wanted to throw it out there that we address those rumors. We pay attention to the complaints. We have to. In this environment, it's very divisive. There's a lot of people on so many different areas of the spectrum of so many concerns right now. So we're paying very close attention to those threats and those events and making sure that we are properly staffing those. And some of the events that we've had recently, we've had up to a couple hundred officers staffing those events from our partnering agencies and changing people's days off and adjusting schedules and doing a lot of things to make sure that we have adequate numbers of officers to deal with those appropriately. Another topic is we continue to focus on the upcoming elections. I think we're down to maybe 26 days. I forget the exact number, but we are paying close attention to the national narrative, the regional and the local narrative. We've met with the Board of Elections and in the county of Charleston, the Sheriff's Department has a incident action plan that they put into place every 4 years. They're kind of the main entity We've met with the sheriffs and all of our partnering agencies that are within the county, to include our federal partners and others, just to discuss what concerns may exist pre-election, post-election. And so I'll just say generally that's something that we're paying close attention to and preparing for, and making sure that we have additional staffing and some other plans in place, and mainly that we're communicating with each other and paying attention to what might occur in different polling places, and threats that surface and all those type of things. I spoke with Wendy this morning, and she, we had a really good, robust discussion with Captain Thompson about our vision for the CPAC. And I just wanted to generally share, I think it's important that you know that we value your input. And I just want to say that because it's so important. Your time is valuable to us. The fact that you're actively engaged and participating in this committee and these subcommittees and these work groups is of great value to us. And if we do this right, you're going to influence the outcomes of things like what we've talked about tonight, our policy, our training, our accountability, and other things. So you have a seat at the table. And we, I guess what I would add to that is, if you have, and Jerry's mentioned a few things, I want to touch on a couple of them, but if you have ideas, if you have things that you want to get involved in, like you were talking earlier about the Policing 101, and you want to learn more about EPIC, if there's things that you want to do, please email Captain Thompson, Captain Cretella, and we will arrange for those opportunities, whether it's training or meetings or, I think they covered that adequately already, but I just want to encourage your involvement. And I really believe that if we do this right, you will actually be out in your communities hearing from others, and you'll bring those voices into our meeting, and we can be efficient and effective in how we have those discussions, but that will influence our thought process and how we do what we do. And as has already been kind of said, it's a marathon. All these things are not going to happen overnight, but incrementally, this is how we get better and how we improve our outcomes. I'm going to just mention wellness. A lot of times people will ask me, how are your officers doing? It's been a busy year. It's been a tough time with the riots, with the protests, with COVID, with violent crime, with so many politics, and the police kind of getting pinched in the middle of things. And I will tell you, it's of paramount importance to me. We have had in the last 3 weeks, 3 deaths in public safety. We had a firefighter in North Charleston who committed suicide. We had a firefighter in our own city a week ago who died and committed suicide. We have an officer in Myrtle Beach late Saturday night was gunned down responding to a domestic violence, was killed in the line of duty, feloniously shot and killed. And all of those things affect all of us in a profound way. It brings up things that have happened in the past. It brings up prior trauma. It brings up, it's wearing a lot of people down. So I say that because one of the most positive things, and Dustin has helped coordinate a lot of this, that we've experienced is people in the community bringing us food. When we have some of these big details, we've had them bring 100 pizzas or bring their kids and bring thank you notes, bring Gatorade and water, and make sure that our people are getting hydrated. And so a lot of positive things, a lot of good partnerships, a lot of good connections on a lot of different levels. But I'll just say with wellness, we have a peer support team, we have a chaplaincy, we have a really good benefits program in the city. We have the opportunity to get counseling, a lot of different ways to achieve that. We try to create an environment where nobody is afraid, that we honor confidentiality, that it's okay to get help, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I just throw that out. A COVID update for us, we have had a year to date right now, 29 positive cases. We have not had any in several weeks. We continue to put people through testing protocols, but we've not had any positive tests in several weeks. We have a system in place where our officers can get the results as soon as 8 hours after they get the test. and usually not more than a day or so. So we're pleased with where we're at, but we have to continue to pay close attention to those things. I'm going to throw out, just because I made a note when we were talking about diversity, you always got to celebrate the successes, celebrate the victories when you can. And I just want to throw out, we just a few days ago announced 2 promotions, and we've had a lot of promotions. I think this is our 5th female lieutenant, if I'm not mistaken, over the last couple years. But we promoted Tonette Mitchell to lieutenant. Tonette is an African-American female. She has about 24 years on the department. She was in charge of our recruitment. A lot of the things that Dustin just listed, she and her team are responsible for some major progress and successes. We're doing really well in recruiting, and she led that team. And she will be taking over community engagement, and Dustin can touch on that. What Shyla Murray was doing, soon Shyla is going to be my chief of staff. She will be moved to that position, and Tonette Mitchell will be in charge of our community engagement. Tonette, among many accomplishments and different assignments, was born and raised in the city of Charleston, is very rooted here. And we also promoted a Sergeant Ariel Polite, who happens to be African-American female also, and was born and raised in the city and is passionate about Charleston and making a difference and reaching a lot of different communities. And I say that because I was talking to a chief in another jurisdiction, and it just struck me. He said, Luther, this was just this morning, he said, I don't even have an African-American female on my entire agency. And it just struck me. We have a lot of talent in our department. We have a lot of diversity. We have a lot of opportunities. It's very exciting, not only where we are, but where we're headed. So I just kind of anecdotally throw that out. I want to touch on something that Jerry mentioned earlier. He said, I'm paraphrasing what I thought was a really good, challenging question, is he said, how are you measuring your outcomes for training? And I think we need to ask that question, right? We're trying to take this to another level. And it's easy to say traditionally, hey, we train X number of people, and Tony kind of touched on this too. We train X number of people, we did X number of classes, but what is the outcome? How does that manifest itself in customer service, in public trust, in public engagement, in problem solving? How does it manifest itself in making our communities safe? How does it manifest itself in lower numbers of complaints and higher numbers of satisfaction? And on a lot of what you talked about, is there another thing that I would say is with complaints, just because we have, and Tony did a great job. Tony's amazing, and I'm glad that he weighed in as he did. I was thinking a lot of the same things that he said before he said them. But I agree, Twan, just because we have a few complaints, a smaller number of complaints, doesn't mean we're doing things right, correct? And we actually, part of the audit, I identified and outlined that. So we actually have, because we've changed our complaint process, significantly larger numbers of complaints. And Tony can address that. Not use of force complaints, he was correct in what he said, but complaints in general have gone up significantly, and that's by design. We want that, we're happy about that, we celebrate that. And he can probably talk a little bit more about that if he wants to, but our complaints have gone up significantly. We're trying to make it easier for people to complain. We're trying to increase the number of complaints in that people maybe do have more confidence. Juan, that would be a measurement to me. If our complaints are going up, that means that maybe we're a little bit more accessible. Maybe people have a little bit more confidence that we're going to actually follow up, that we're going to contact them, that we're going to tell them what the resolution was, and that we're doing something about their complaint, that it's being codified, and that we're tracking it. And so I think that's an important thing to note, just as we were talking. And somebody mentioned the body cameras, and do we review them, and do we do audits? And I know Tony kind of hit on that well, so I won't repeat what he said. But again, it hits on what Jerry said, is outcomes. We need to be oriented towards outcomes. It's one thing to say, hey, we have a program. In fact, the city of Charleston has had a program since 2015. I think probably one of the first to adopt a program in the state, and probably one of the that early in one of the few agencies in the country. But it's one thing to say you have a program. It's one thing to say you have a policy. it's one thing to say that you have cameras, but what I heard asked earlier, and I agree, is the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we using them properly? Do we have a good process of auditing and making sure that the cameras are actually turned on when they're supposed to be turned on, they're turned off when they're supposed to be turned off? That we actually, one of the questions was, do we review those for use of force? And absolutely, that's mandatory. That's part of our policy. But that's kind of the first step. That's a minimum thing. And the officers actually really have, in most cases, the body cameras help them because, for example, if there's a complaint or there's an incident, we just had a case a couple nights ago where somebody pointed a gun at somebody. That was all on the body camera. And so it's showing so much good work that our officers are doing. So it goes in all directions, and the body cameras are really beneficial. It's showing a lot of the good work. And if there's a complaint, then immediately that's the first thing that we pull. And it's very easy. It's very fluid among the teams, among the commanders, among the officers. And we've done a lot of training, and we've followed up to make sure that it's beyond just a policy or a program that we've said we have, but they're actually being audited, and that the troops are turning on when they're supposed to. And it's really, I think, a big positive for us. But that was a good question I just wanted to touch on. So to Jerry's question of outcomes, that somewhat touches a little bit on what Wendy was talking about with 360, reframing the conversation, becoming a learning organization, asking the tough questions, and continuing to dig. I often say I want to ask the same question 10 times to 10 different people in 10 different ways. We have to get used to that. We have to feel comfortable with that. And ultimately, no matter how good we get, and I think we're getting better every day, we can always, always, always get better. And I think when we embrace that mindset, then we're going to continue to make progress in all of these areas, and we will build confidence in all these areas that we're talking about. The last thing I'll say that Paul hit on, which is a great, obviously, I'm sure Paul has a lot of experience with training and just the op tempo of a large organization and doing a lot of things. We cannot afford to get behind in our training. We're doing more training. We're seeking partnerships. A lot of it is from, as Tony articulated, and he hit on just that one chunk of training that we're talking about. He did a great job. There's a lot of training that we're doing now for for leadership development at different levels at command schools that we're sending our command to, and a whole lot of different pieces. And we cannot afford to slow down. We're actually becoming a younger organization. If you think about that trend, so the more that we hire, and we're hiring a lot of people. We have 43 in the pipe right now. And I think we're going to probably have maybe another 25 or 30 in January. And we believe that we can get to complement by the end of next year. Again, we're not going to compromise on the people that we're hiring. I'd rather go short than hire people we shouldn't be hiring. I talk about that a lot. I'd much rather get the right people for the right reasons, which again ties to outcomes, which Jerry, I think, is going to always continue to pull us back to. So I thought Paul asked a good question when it comes to making sure that we don't slow down on our training. As Tony said, it was very difficult in the very beginning. And we immediately said, we cannot allow, with the op tempo, with the protests, and with so many other things going on, we cannot allow ourselves to get behind. So kudos to Tony and the training staff, because they really did get creative. They did a lot of stuff online. They did a lot of things in person and just kind of distance. We have a new training room, which I think some of you have seen at headquarters, and that new training room has helped us a lot. And we actually have said we want to hit the gas pedal, not hit the brakes. And we've done just that, I think. So with that, the last thing that I'll say, because I think this was since our last meeting, there was a budget hearing that occurred. We call it the ad hoc budget committee with the city council and the mayor. In our budget hearing, There was good support for the police department. There's emphasis that we all need to be creative in our partnerships and our solutions and dealing with things like mental health and homelessness and opioids and a variety of other things. There was agreement that the police can't solve everything and shouldn't be put in that place, and that we need to get creative with partnerships and other agencies to come together to deal with a lot of the social challenges and problems that really don't belong with the police. So it was a very good, productive conversation. And even with as difficult as the budgets are right now with the COVID climate, there's been significant sustainable support for our budget, which we're thankful for. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief? Any questions or comments? I'm sorry. Questions or comments? Well, Chief, on behalf of the council, I do want to thank you for the volume of information that you shared with us tonight and the progress that's being made. And just like you said, we know it can't happen overnight. We're very patient, and we all know that we still have a long ways to go. But I think we're very committed to meeting the challenge and going forward. So thank you for always having officer support in our meetings with us. I'm sure that the various council members really do appreciate that, because we're getting firsthand knowledge about what's going on. And thank you for being open to accepting the comments that we make and the questions that we ask. If there are no additional questions or comments, as we look at our agenda, what we have left is topics for the next agenda. And what I've done is jotted down some notes. Our next meeting will be December the 3rd at 5:30. And I have down, of course, election of chairman and vice chairman, because January 1 is when we start with new chairman and vice chairman taking on. So any meetings after December 3rd, which would be in the new year. I have crime analysis group. Captain Thompson suggested that he would be able to get someone from the crime analysis group to come talk to us. And then discussion of the after action report that was sent to us today. Captain Thompson was kind enough to send us the link the chief was referring to. If you did not receive that, please email to Bethany or me, and we can forward it to you. But it did come from Captain Dustin Thompson. And thank you again, Captain, for sending that. Any other items? Of course, we'd like to still get an update on the community engagement, Captain Thompson. If you have any other things to share with us in December, at the December 3rd meeting.
Absolutely. I mean, we can make that a part of every meeting, and I'll be a lot briefer than I was, but I can absolutely do that.
Oh no, you were good. You were good. I think it looked like everybody was well engaged and appreciative of the information that you were sharing. So no, we appreciate you with that very comprehensive report.
Madam Chair?
Oh, sorry, Jerome.
Yeah, just a suggestion, if any of the subcommittees have an action item or recommendation that they want to bring forward to the full body, we should ask for that. Hopefully we're moving toward recommendations and actions. So just the general discussions might not be necessary to report out, but if we have any specific actions that we're recommending, I would urge the subcommittees to bring those forward and have them as part of the agenda.
Thank you for that. I do plan to still have listed on the agenda subcommittee report. So at that time, subcommittees, as you heard Jerry state to us, please make sure that you have any recommendations, please, at that time.
Yeah.
And because we're still going to most probably be in a virtual environment, it would be good, subcommittees, if you would still use that format. If you don't have a recommendation to bring forward, still use that format so that those who may tune in, who did not tune in tonight, who may tune in on December 3rd, they will get a chance to hear about the fact that there are subcommittees at work.
Yeah.
And if you get a chance, please try to go back on YouTube and take a look at the meeting that the Special Commission on Racial Equality had. Jerry, I saw you there. So please get a chance to take a look and see. and you'll hear a little bit of the talkings and the actions that they have underway. They're under a very short time frame again, 90 days, but it is worth getting a chance to see so that you can hear some of their concerns and challenges as well.
Madam Chair, now that you raised that question, just share with the other members of the council that I am serving as vice chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Subcommittee, so that the work that we're doing, we need to figure out how to, if there's anything that we would want to recommend to them, or if there's anything that they're talking about that should be on our agenda, since that commission only has a 90-day length of life, and we have a longer life, we may be picking up some additional work from them.
Thank you. Bethany?
Tuan, I was just going to say, for anybody who gets questions, IT was not able to live stream this meeting tonight. They didn't log in time. And so I told them that I would just send them my recording, and hopefully it should be up first thing tomorrow morning. So if you get any comments or questions from citizens, it should be up on YouTube. I'm hoping by lunchtime tomorrow.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Mrs. Whitaker, your availability as far as it pertains to the next Policy and Procedures Subcommittee meeting, I don't think we set that date pending whether you were able to take the minutes at it or not.
We did. I think Wendy's going to send a doodle poll. I'm available almost any Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoon, except for the first Wednesday of the month. And so I think we were going to try to schedule those next subcommittee meetings the first and second weeks of November.
Yes, ma'am, that sounds good.
Thank you, Max. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so very much for coming on tonight. I know this was a change in what we originally had. So happy that your schedules were able to accommodate this meeting. I think we've heard a wealth of information. So thank you so very much for all of our presenters tonight. And council members, I think we have our work cut out for us. Don't forget your homework assignments to your subcommittee leads. And we look forward to seeing you at subcommittee meeting or on December 3rd. Thanks, Bethany, for all you do. And Steve. Steve is hiding somewhere. But many thanks to Bethany and Steve for what they do to ensure that we're able to function effectively. Have a good evening. Stay safe and healthy. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.